Is Robby Keene finally on the right path? Like his former rival Miguel Diaz, he certainly had an arc full of twists and turns up to this point, but Season 5 brought out who he really is. Like his father, someone who's made mistakes and is trying to do the right thing. It took a long road to get here, but along the way, Keene mended a lot of bridges that he burned. This is how Robby became better. Let's talk about his journey on that road, his relationships with Miguel, Tory, and his father, his attributes, and more. Let's first recap what we know about Robby so far. Since this is a continuation of my last video, Why There Is Hope for Robby, I'm only going to recap the events of Robby's arc in Season 5. Feel free to skip ahead to avoid the recap, but be warned, you'll miss some important details later on in the video. After patching things up with his father after the 51st All-Valley tournament, Robby joins Johnny on a road trip down to Mexico, correctly assuming the father-son trip is really about finding Miguel. After the two have a heart-to-heart while fixing a flat, Keene stays with his dad to try to make things right, following in his footsteps. Their journey includes Robby winning a pepper eating contest, assisting Johnny in a fight against an MMA fighter, and eventually finding Miguel. Robby attempts to convince Tory and Kenny to leave Cobra Kai, but due to his actions being misinterpreted by Miguel and Hawk at the water park as they assume he's still in Cobra Kai, this results in both Cobra Kai and Miyagi-Fang students getting ejected from the park, a breakup with his girlfriend, and almost getting into a fight with Miguel. Despite Johnny's repeated attempts, Miguel and Robby refuse to get along until they finally fight out their differences, patching things up as the two find out Carmen is pregnant. Continuing to make things right, Robby is sought out by Sam and he makes amends with Daniel, rejoining Miyagi-Do and the rest of the Alliance to take the fight to Silver. With the rest of the students, he trains under Chosen and eventually puts things to rest with Hawk, thanks to a suggestion from Dimitri. Robby assists with the dojo's presentation for the Sekai Takai and again tries to convince Kenny to leave Cobra Kai, but to no avail as Silver has his claws in him. The following day, after learning Silver rigged the All-Valley and that Tory was working with Kreese to try to stop him, he bravely and single-handedly goes to Cobra Kai to convince the other students to leave, but is mocked by Silver, resulting in a bounty being placed on Miyagi-Fang if any of them step foot in the dojo again. He joins the rest of Miyagi-Fang later that night in taking Silver down, and although is cornered by Kenny, who he refuses to fight, he is saved by Miguel and witnesses Silver both being exposed and defeated. After the fight, Robby reconciles with Tory and watches Silver finally get arrested. Let's first talk about Robby's road to redemption. I touched on this topic in my previous video on how it started in Season 4, but it really starts to occur in Season 5. Although Robby is angry that Johnny lied to him and that he could have been at home spending time with Tory, his attitude changes when the two fix the van's flat tire. He's surprised to hear that when he ran away after the school fight that both Johnny and Daniel went looking for him and fought the thief who hijacked the van from him. He also listens to his father state that he regrets letting both him and Miguel down, and the words sink in when Johnny tells him, if you're serious about making things right, you can start by helping Miguel. I know you have your fair share of regrets when it comes to him. What I suspect is that realizing that Mr. LaRusso and his dad put things aside despite having such a deep rivalry, he knows he can do the same. This is why he helps Johnny fight Owen and his gang and tells him that since he wants to make things right, he wants to help, even showing off the map he managed to swipe from the scammers. It's worth noting that in Long Long Way From Home, Robby's plaid t-shirt and t-shirt underneath are green, a color that can sometimes symbolize qualities such as growth, transformation, rebirth, and peace, hinting both at his eventual return to Miyagi-Do and how he finally puts things to rest with Miguel later on. Somewhat also related, this attire also reminds me of Tommy Oliver's from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, someone who wore a similar outfit on debut, and as anyone familiar with the series would know, another skilled martial artist who had a similar arc of going down the wrong path at first, but later redeemed himself. Rest in peace, JDF. In Mole, Robby volunteers to participate in the pepper eating contest to continue to make things right and to get the van back after it gets towed. This is one of my favorite scenes of Robby's because he returns to his Miyagi-Do roots by performing the breathing technique he learned from Daniel, mirroring his then former teacher doing the same thing before breaking the ice in Okinawa. However, he puts a twist on this as it's later revealed he swapped out the pepper for a piece of El Masticador, pulling a page out of Johnny's book. During the scene, the track Enchilados helps describe this as we hear the familiar Miyagi-Do motif when he does the breathing technique, and as he presumably swallows the pepper, you hear a mix of both the motif again, but this time with part of the melody of Quiver as the bass line, showing that Robby was able to mix both methods to form his own way. When seeing his father in danger, Keene wants to intervene but respects his father's wishes not to until he sees Johnny in danger, passing him the pepper to get an advantage. In Downward Spiral, having learned from both his father and Daniel, Robby tries to persuade Tory to leave Cobra Kai, mentioning that if he could leave, as he was once corrupted, she could too, and mentions his concern for Kenny still being in Cobra Kai, something she agrees with as she takes da-eun under her wing later on, and attempts to help intervene from a neutral standpoint when Miyagi-Fang and Cobra Kai get into arguments. It doesn't seem that way to Hawk and Miguel because the moment they look, they catch him pushing Mitch back. However, in some of the following shots, he stands closer to Miyagi-Fang, foreshadowing his true allegiance, but as they disperse, he stands alone as he's currently not in either dojo officially. Right before Hawk's race with Tory, Kenny sees Keene for the first time since the tournament and tells him that he's quitting Cobra Kai. He also mentions that he didn't mean to hurt him in their fight and tries to talk to Kenny the same way Daniel talked to him, but Payne gets aggressive and it's clear that he's too far gone, which Robby expresses concern about when he walks away. It's also worth pointing out that during the race itself, Robby is standing with Miyagi-Fang and only walks away when he sees things escalate between Kenny and Hawk, which as mentioned before, leads to both dojos being kicked out from the water park. Robby talks to Tory about this afterward, explaining that she needs to pick one or the other, and if she picks Cobra Kai, he's frustrated and done trying to help anyone who won't listen to him. While Keene wants to make things work with Miguel, though telling Tory he's not sure since the problem might be too big to fix, he refuses to go along with Johnny's ideas until being asked to fight it out, per Daniel's idea to Johnny. Though the fight ends with Miguel having the upper hand, Robby forgives Miguel and apologizes, expressing his regret of that day. Off screen, after learning from Anthony that Robby defended him against Kenny, Sam and Johnny ask Keene to speak to Daniel as they haven't spoken since the tournament. He apologizes to Daniel and says he was right about Cobra Kai and feels guilty as he led Kenny down a dark path. Also concerned about Tory, he calls Daniel his sensei and rejoins Miyagi-Fang. Something I never got to point out in a previous video and what possibly makes Daniel feel extra guilty about what happened with Robby is that after being upset with him taking Sam to Johnny's, he discovers that a student was studying Okinawa history just like he did. Keene tries to make small talk with Hawk, who is still upset about losing his mohawk and what happened at the water park. Pointing out that they were both in Cobra Kai, though calling him an asshole, Dimitri helps the two squash the rivalry they have, and also Robby agrees to do so because of learning from his rivalry with Miguel. When everyone follows Anthony's idea, Robby is the first to get into a stance after hearing Chosen's whistle, determined to learn, and although he's the first one to go down, he and Hawk attempt to stop Chosen at first unsuccessfully on their own, but later look at each other and work together as they both land a kick on Chosen after he was held down by Sam and hit by Miguel, standing with the Binary brothers as he defends Anthony. Perhaps feeling bad for what Kenny did to Anthony, in the background while Miguel talks to Johnny and Taikai, we can see that Robby starts to take him under his wing by teaching him the breathing exercise and also how to strike before Kenny's match with Hawk. He also tries to persuade Kenny to hash things out with Anthony as he learned from Miguel, but Kenny still refuses to listen, disappointing Robby. During Sam's match against da-eun, in a parallel to rooting for Cobra Kai during Season 4, it is Robby who cheers on Sam when she lands the first point, smiles after she lands the second point, and when LaRusso lands the final point, yells out "Yes, Sam," and is the first to yell in celebration after she's declared the winner. Knowing that the students are still in danger, Keene makes the bold move to give the Cobra Kai dojo a speech, telling them to not listen to a thing Silver says, putting himself in danger, considering how upset Silver was with him at the last All Valley. Even knowing he could best Kenny during the raid on Cobra Kai, he still refuses to fight him, though is quickly jumped by other members of Cobra Kai until Miguel intervenes. Still, after all of that, he tries to talk to Kenny, which the latter refuses because he's still upset. Robby's redemption is one of my favorite arcs of the season, as he was able to mend a lot of relationships. Johnny, Daniel, Miguel, Sam, Dimitri, Hawk, and eventually Tory. As I said in my first Robby video, he felt that the former Cobra Kai students wouldn't change, as you can't change the way you feel. That alluded to his dark path, but now it has another meaning. Robby really was Miyagi-Do at heart, and even having teachers like Silver and Kreese couldn't change that. He's now where he needs to be. Let's also take a look at Robby's relationship with Tory. This is something I briefly touched on in my Why Tory Has Changed video. I think what makes this relationship better than Robby being with Sam and Miguel being with Tory is that they both come from similar backgrounds. They didn't have many consistent mentors in their lives and had to fight for what was theirs. The two are also similar in attitudes at times, where they have their issues but have good hearts underneath. At the prom, they both confess that they want to win something for once and are no longer concerned about making Sam and Miguel jealous because they develop genuine feelings for each other. During Long Long Way From Home, Robby indicates that he could have stayed at home with Tory, implying that he misses her. Notice that Tory quickly greets Robby with a kiss after he calls out to her, presumably as the two haven't seen each other since the tournament, and she shares the same sentiment that Robby had in the first episode. She missed him. It's clear that Keene doesn't want Nichols in the dojo anymore and is conflicted when Tory refuses to budge on her stance, not knowing that she's staying in there to try to help Kreese take down Silver. This escalates as the drama goes on that day, and Robby ultimately makes her choose. Stay with Cobra Kai or stay with him? Again, not knowing her plan, he gives up trying to help her and Kenny as he doesn't think they'll listen anymore. The two don't interact again until the episode of Survivors, where after the Sakai Takai audition, Robby and Miguel intervene between Sam and Tory. When Sam makes it known that Tory was working with Kreese this entire time, Keene is surprised and tries to stop her from running off, but to no avail. Notably, after Silver asks him to leave so he can continue teaching class, he gives Tory a subtle nod that he won't leave her behind and then walks out. In Head of the Snake, Robby implies that he's tried texting Tory several times, and finally talks to her again when she shows up with Sam, asking her what's wrong with her right hand out of both worry and curiosity. The two get back on friendly terms as Tory suggests using her card since she and Keene are both on probation, and as a way to make up for her past with Cobra Kai, and he smiles at the idea. The two also stand up to Silver when he finally arrives, and similar to the water park, Tory walks over to Robby when they have an opportunity to talk. Nichols says that Kenny will come around and knows that they both should say sorry to each other, but wants affection more than anything right now, sealing their reconciliation with a kiss. I feel that these two are a better couple, and given how they have similar backgrounds and arcs, they can learn a lot from each other, and I'm excited to see them both with their new senseis. The romantic tension between them was teased as early as the end of Season 3, and although their relationship got cut short in Season 5, I'm hoping to see more of this develop in the next season. As I mentioned in my Why Miguel Diaz Continues to Evolve video, I would love to see these two have a double date with Miguel and Sam in Season 6. Let's also take a look at Robby's relationship with Miguel. As Johnny correctly predicted, and as we heard from Robby at the end of Season 4, Keene still has his regrets about Miguel and stays to help make things right. While Johnny makes the phone call to Carmen, it's hinted that Robby is the one who changed the tire by himself, as he notably kicks it when they arrive at the bus stop. As mentioned before, he intervenes when Johnny is about to be strangled by one of Owen's men, in somewhat of a parallel to not witnessing Johnny being choked out by Kreese, and like Daniel Miyagi, saves Johnny from being choked. Also in the same fight, Johnny saves Robby from being choked out as well. When they finally find Miguel, Robby sends off in the distance watching Johnny hug his rival, in a callback to Season 1, but this time does not walk away in a fit of anger and or jealousy. During Downward Spiral, Robby calmly asks Miguel to stay out of the argument between the dojos in a parallel to Season 3, but of course, Diaz misinterprets this action. Not knowing that Keene intervened to try to stop Hawk and Kenny from fighting, Robby finally gets confrontational when Miguel starts to get aggressive again. However, a detail I noticed when the two talk in the parking lot is something I previously missed on my first watch. Despite the two raising their voices, Miguel is the only one who shoves Robby and is more aggressive during this argument. He shoves Robby 3 times, and the latter only puts his finger on his chest but never tries to escalate the situation. As I mentioned in my Miguel video, despite the two being at odds, they again are in agreement with each other on what Johnny's trying to do and finish each other's sentences and wear similar colors. Red and gray, symbolizing their alliance with Eagle Fang and how they're morally ambiguous as neither are the bad guy in the rivalry at this point. Robby's shirt is similar to one he wore in Cobra Kai Never Dies, and both shirts are similar to what Johnny wore in Different But Same. Despite Miguel giving him daggers at Johnny's apartment, Robby pays attention to what his father says to not escalate the argument and respects the two's relationship but doesn't want to be forced to make this work. When they decide to fight it out, Robby talks trash like he does in Season 4 during his All Valley matches, but gets worried when Miguel has the upper hand. He is relieved and humbled realizing that, despite Miguel having every right to knock him over the edge like he did at school, Diaz is showing him mercy once again, even asking why he held back. Keene mentions that he didn't want to injure Miguel but to fight to the finish and got so angry that he didn't realize where they were. As I pointed out in my Why There Was No Hope for Robby video, as he knocked Diaz over the edge, he quickly displayed concern, worry, and regret when seeing what happened to him. He states that he has felt bad ever since that happened and is appreciative when Miguel forgives him. This bond between the two strengthens when Carmen tells Robby he's welcome over any time, seemingly also being forgiven by Carmen. It's also worth pointing out that in Ouroboros, Robby stands between Miguel and Sam, two people he was at odds with at different periods, and has finally patched things up with them. When Johnny asks them if they're ready to show the world who's boss, he smiles at Miguel and gives him a friendly bump on his arm. During their presentation of offense, it's worth pointing out that Robby is wearing Eagle Fang colors, symbolizing his repaired relationship with his father and his new friendship with Miguel. When talking to Kenny about putting the past with Anthony behind him, he looks to Miguel, who nods to him out of respect when the latter hears him about putting rivalries aside. Similarly to what I talked about in Miguel's video, Keene pats Diaz on the back after his pep talk to Sam, hugs him after Sam's match and when they gain entry, and high-fives him as well. While we don't see this expressed directly in Season 5, I'd love to see Robby thank Miguel for saving him from Kenny and his friends in Season 6, as he was able to catch his breath and fight back. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw a Chosen and Daniel-like relationship between the two, as Miguel spared Robby and also saved him. I think one of my favorite details from the season is that during the first 2 episodes, Robby and Miguel's scenes played back to back, further showing how their arcs intertwined. Of course, the one thing we were all looking forward to in Season 5, and what we can't not talk about, is Robby's new relationship with his father, Johnny. During Long Way From Home, we see Johnny being a father for the first time to Robby, buying him snacks and a new shirt as he wants to bond with his son while also trying to make things up with Miguel. Keene is upset that his father lied to him, thinking it was a mistake to be here, but again, as mentioned before, starts to soften when realizing that both his dad and Daniel cared about him and worked together to look for him, thus inspiring him to stay and help with Miguel. From this point onward, Robby also affectionately calls Johnny Dad, more times than we've heard in the previous 4 seasons. When hearing his dad on the phone, we can tell that he starts to respect Johnny as he's owning up to his mistakes, not wanting Carmen to get involved and doing what he can to make things right. Seeing the two fight the scamming surfers is also a feel-good moment, as this is the first time we've seen them fight together. They then bond over their new story, hugging each other, and later that night, Robby offers Johnny some snacks as they smile at each other. In the next episode, Lawrence shows how proud and confident he is in his son, betting all the money they have on Robby during the pepper eating contest and calling Robby's sleight of hand the most badass thing I've ever seen. When seeing his father in danger, Keene throws Johnny the pepper so he can even the playing field with Vicente, as he had someone get involved in the fight to hold him down. In Downward Spiral, Robby talks fondly of his dad to Tory, mentioning that they finally got through some of their issues on their trip. Even though not wanting to be part of his dad's antics to get Miguel and him to be friends, Robby still shows up to Olive Garden first, though probably as a result of riding there with Johnny, but worth pointing out that he decided to stay with his dad as he and his mom are now civil, respects Miguel and Johnny's relationship, and at least hears out Johnny's idea before shutting it down. When finding out the news that Carmen is pregnant, Robby hugs Johnny first and is the one to fix the door to his father's apartment, symbolizing how he repaired his relationship with both him and Miguel. In Taikai, Keene even teases his father and Miguel, again respecting their relationship, and is now securing his own relationship with his father. I'm glad that these two patched up their differences, and the one thing that he learned from his father was to put rivalries aside, even if it took a fist fight to do it. I can't wait to see how this relationship develops in Season 6, and I'm also interested in how Robby plays big brother to his new sibling. Something I talked about as one of his strengths in my Why There Was No Hope for Robby video is his intelligence. Let's see how Robby used that to his advantage in Season 5. When in Mexico, he was quick to perceive that there was something more to the father-son bonding trip that Johnny brought him along for. Unlike his father, because he used the van and lived in it, he was able to point out where the lug wrench was. Somehow, after the fight, Keene managed to grab the map from the scammers and overheard the address where Miguel might be. Off the cuff, Robby knew the exchange rate of pesos to US dollars compared to Johnny. Again, one of my favorite moments of his is how he used a Miyagi-Do technique with an eagle fang twist to win the pepper eating contest. Because of Daniel's advice and witnessing Silver's corruption firsthand, Robby's smart enough to try to convince others to leave Cobra Kai as he was once like them. During Hulk's match with Kenny, it's implied that he knows the ref is paid off or biased because he knows what lengths Silver would go to. When Sam is about to fight Tory for the qualifying match, Robby knows something's up because Tory isn't around. In Head of the Snake, it can only be assumed that Robby knew that Tory may have hurt her hand because of Silver. He also knew that Silver would have cleaned out any footage at the old dojo because of how empty the old location was. Here are my final thoughts on Robby and what we could see from him in the future. I'm glad to see Robby not only back with Miyagi-Do, but also now having a relationship with his father. The two both sorely needed this reconciliation after attempts from both sides, and with Johnny taking accountability for his rivalry getting in the way of Robby becoming a better person, this further cements that Robby was on the right path at some point. In Season 6, it's clear that he and Miguel fight Kenny and Sean at some point, whether it'll be a friendly spar or perhaps an actual grudge match. This is what I suspect gets Kenny to finally join Miyagi Fang, and I'm also sure we'll see that this is when Kenny will finally put his anger toward Robby aside. I'm also hoping to see more of his relationships with Tory, Johnny, Miguel, and Anthony, as it seems he's going to take the latter under his wing. I think Robby has finally redeemed himself, and he'll stand out as one of the dojo's leaders not only when it comes to skill, but when it comes to growth as a human being. And speaking of growth, Miguel also grew as a person and mended relationships with Johnny and his girlfriend. He also put his rivalry to rest with Robby and even saved his life on one occasion.